Ben Dubose here, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of the team. I'm the host of this podcast, The Lager Line, served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Karbach Brewing, their beer developed in collaboration with your Houston Rockets. So today's show on this Monday, September 11th, is going to be relatively quick and simple. No intro music because I'm not trying to hype you guys. This is a very sad day for everyone around the Houston Rockets, and I feel compelled to at least address the elephant in the room regarding Kevin Porter Jr., but I don't want to talk about it too much because this is going to take a little bit of time to play out, and we've got plenty of time ahead to talk about the implications in terms of basketball, the franchise, what the path forward is. We can do that more. There's still 3 weeks to go until training camp even starts. So we'll have more episodes at length. I'll bring in Paolo Alves, my co-host, for his perspective. We'll do all of that as the days and weeks progress. Today, I just want to offer a little bit of initial reaction and context to what happened. And I'll begin by simply reading from Jonathan Fagan of the Houston Chronicle. His story, he spoke to someone with the New York Police Department, and this is what he wrote in the Houston Chronicle. Rockets guard Kevin Porter Jr. was arrested and charged Monday with assault and strangulation in New York, an NYPD spokesperson said. Porter, 23 years old, was placed in custody on the scene. Police responded to a 911 call from a New York hotel at 6:45 a.m. Upon arrival, officers were informed that a 26-year-old female sustained a laceration to the right side of her face and was complaining about pain to her neck, the spokesperson said. A preliminary investigation on scene determined that a known individual struck her multiple times upon her body and placed his hands around her neck. The woman, 26, was taken to an area hospital for evaluation. Rockets Journal manager Rafael Stone declined to comment on the situation. We are in the process of gathering more information surrounding the matter involving Kevin Porter Jr., a Rocket spokesperson said. We have no further comment at this time. So, first and foremost, this is incredibly sad. Domestic violence is unacceptable. If you want more information about the victim, that's out there, but the NYPD did not mention specifics regarding her identity in the statement, so I'm going to steer away from that as well. Again, Google is your friend. If you want to learn more, you certainly can, but I'm just going to talk about the Kevin Porter Jr. angle and a small bit about what that means for the Rockets moving forward. My guess is that Kevin has played his last game with the team. Now, Jonathan has a little bit of information about how this could be handled within the NBA. The new collective bargaining agreement, which took effect on July 1st, stipulates that a player does not necessarily have to be convicted of a crime to be in violation of the league's domestic violence policy. Commissioner Adam Silver can choose to put a player on paid administrative leave while the league investigates, and based on the findings, he has the authority to fine, suspend, or dismiss and disqualify a player from any further association with the NBA and its teams. Physical assault or battery, sexual assault, stalking, harassment, and other forms of physical or psychological abuse all fall under the umbrella of the NBA's domestic violence policy. NBA spokesperson Mike Bass said that the NBA is aware of the reports regarding Kevin Porter, and the league office is in contact with the Rockets and in the process of gathering more information. Now, I want to be clear. Kevin Porter Jr., who was traded to the Rockets in January 2021, he's played the last 3 seasons with the team. He absolutely deserves due process in a court of law, and he's going to get it. That's the American criminal justice system. However, the standard for Kevin in a court of law is different than the standard that a private business or institution, be it the Rockets or the NBA, has for playing within the lines. It's a privilege, not a right. And so even if we hear more information, it gets murkier with regards to exactly what went on in that hotel room. This was and the specifics of the incident. Whatever it takes to convict him in a court of law or potentially put him behind bars, and some of that may depend on, of course, how the victim wants to proceed and how aggressively she wants to handle the situation. Whatever happens there is not necessarily correlated with what the Rockets and the NBA do. Again, playing in the league and making an enormous amount of money. He's currently guaranteed nearly $16 million for next season. And at the end of this coming year, there's an option for the next 2 years. But the NBA, actually, under the domestic violence policy, has the right to void the contract entirely. We'll get into that. I do think that's at least possible, but the league will have to go through a bit of an investigation first. As they mentioned, all parties want to get more information on this. I think it's important to underscore at the outset that the standard to play for an NBA team is different than the standard to avoid jail. Sometimes, especially in social media, it feels like those get overlapped far too easily. Even if the actual legal proceedings don't play out a certain way, the question of whether it's appropriate for him to play for the Rockets or another NBA team, in my opinion, is entirely separate. Those two should not be conflated as one and the same. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't talk to him and get his side of the story. Of course, you should. But in this case, since it appears there's also physical evidence, you don't want to assume, but it seems pretty damning at this point in time. And my guess is that he's played his final game with the Rockets and perhaps in the entire NBA, because this is simply unacceptable. And it would be unacceptable behavior no matter who it is, let's make clear. But in the case of Kevin Porter Jr. and the baggage that led to him joining the Rockets in the first place, I think it's all the more applicable to this particular situation and why he's not going to get another chance. Look, he was the number 30 overall draft pick in 2019, despite having talent far above that. In large part, that's because he had off the court issues and he was suspended at USC, his college team. Then in Cleveland, he played 1 year with the Cavaliers, showed a lot of promise at times, and he was traded to the Rockets for basically nothing after just 1 season with the Cavaliers, giving up on a first round draft pick and pulling the plug entirely, basically giving him away because of the issues that they had witnessed in the locker room, also off the court. There was an allegation that he punched a woman in the face during his time in Cleveland. Even if that didn't proceed in a court of law, again, when we're talking about playing for an NBA team, the standards are a bit different. And Cleveland decided it wanted to move on altogether and completely part ways. So the Rockets brought him on as basically a lottery ticket, is the way I would put it. They knew the anger issues were real. That's something I've heard for 2+ years from everyone I've spoken to in the organization. He's been trying to work on them, but the underlying issues are very real. There were a few incidents from time to time, most notably January 1st of 2022, when he got so upset at halftime of the Rockets Nuggets New Year's Day game that he literally left the arena and drove home. The Rockets suspended him for a game afterward. There's been a few little things like that, but nothing, at least to my knowledge, that rose anywhere near the level of what happened Sunday night and Monday morning. This is a new level, and it's unacceptable behavior regardless, but it's especially unacceptable behavior when everyone knows you're basically on a zero tolerance policy. At one point, Kevin Porter Jr. said, "They saved my life," referring to the Rockets, because he was in such a dark place after what happened in Cleveland. He knew the severity of everything that's followed him in the past. They had him work with John Lucas, who's helped a lot of troubled athletes over the years. It's not like Kevin Porter Jr. was unaware of this being a serious situation for him. And I do think that he worked on it. However, this was a clear relapse. And now I think we're to the point of no return. And I think, again, domestic violence is unacceptable. It should be condemned in all forms. It should not be tolerated. And I think it would be true no matter who the player is, but it's especially true when the player does have that baggage. It's something that he's been working on. And if you've given second chances, if you've tried to reform and he still does this, again, you can't 100% assume. You do talk to him and at least try to get a better understanding of exactly what happened. But unless there's real evidence that somehow the police version of events is inaccurate or misleading, and I find that extraordinarily hard to believe, then it's hard to see how this ends in any other way other than Kevin Porter Jr. and the Rockets parting ways. Now, as far as when and how that happens, I think it's important to note that the NBA has jurisdiction here. So even if the Rockets wanted to cut him for the immediate PR boost, to put out a statement saying Kevin Porter Jr. will never play for the Rockets again, That's not how it works under the new CBA. This was negotiated between the league and the players union. The league has its own investigators that are going to look into this and come to their findings. And the Rockets have to wait for that process to play out. That's how it was negotiated during CBA talks. Domestic violence is an important issue. We've seen it happen with Miles Bridges. And initially, the team is going to have to give deference to what happens in the league office. Now, if the league office does not void the contract, then there may come a point that the Rockets have to make that decision themselves. And ultimately, I think they would. Again, there's baggage with KPJ, and beyond that, because his contract is so year to year, in large part because of that baggage, that's how the Rockets were able to get a contract that had so many team options. Because again, that history dictates that you don't want to commit that much money to him long term, because even if you don't want it to happen, something like this could happen. It's not entirely unforeseeable. And so the Rockets protected themselves. They had the leverage to do so. It's quite frankly the same reason why they acquired him so cheaply in the first place, because Cleveland saw all these incidents and threw their hands up and said, we can't deal with this anymore. So on some level, the Rockets can't be completely stunned. And even if the NBA doesn't decide to void the contract, this will be an interesting case study because I believe it's the first one under the new CBA, which took effect on July 1st. The Rockets could then take the additional step themselves. And because the contract is so year to year, it's easier for them to potentially do so because it's not as if you're just eating salary with regards to your future outlook. He's basically up after this year anyway. If you cut him before the regular season opener, he's only owed 1 million for the period beyond this coming season. And as far as this coming season, the money's already spent in free agency. So really, you can get out of the Kevin Porter Jr. business pretty easily. And that's why I ultimately expect the Rockets to. I suppose, you can make an argument that, well, if you just keep him and put him, regardless of whether the league investigation is wrapped up by training camp or not, even if it's not, my guess is the Rockets will keep him away from the team and say, and maybe the league puts him under paid administrative leave, as Jonathan Fagan alluded to during this process. But regardless, since he's not going to be around for the regular season, there's no point having around his teammates in training camp one way or another, whether he's cut or not. My guess is that he's away from the team during training camp, whether he's officially under contract or not. And some will ask, couldn't you just keep him on leave or suspended, whatever you want to call it, through the season, and then at least use him as potential salary filler in trades because he's $15 million? And say what you will about the ethics, there is precedent for NBA teams taking a guy who's basically not an active player because of poor conduct, but using them as salary filler and then cutting bait. Think of Myers Leonard in 2021, who the Heat had away from the team after the slur he used, and he ended up being traded at the trade deadline for salary reasons to make a deal work with the Thunder, and then the Thunder just cut him. I suppose that's a possibility, but again, that would require months of sort of waiting around in terms of getting to a point where you could actually get closer to the trade deadline and use him. I don't know if the Rockets would want him around for that long. The severity of this, of course, is even worse than the slur, because in this case, we're talking about physical domestic violence, strangulation. This is really, really bad. And so I'd personally be surprised if the Rockets tried to keep him around just because theoretically you might could use him as salary filler down the line. My guess is the Rockets want to let the league investigate, and shortly after the league investigates, they'll cut ties. But even if the NBA doesn't void the contract, the Rockets can just release him themselves. I don't think it's worth keeping him around for months upon months out of hope that maybe you need him as salary filler, especially because, quite frankly, you already have a lot of salary filler. Jock Landale and Jeff Green, that's $20 million right there. And I'm trying not to talk too much about basketball because, again, basketball is secondary on a day like today. I'm just talking about the basketball and financial angles because this is a podcast that covers the Rockets. I want to underscore that the victim in this incredibly sad situation, that is what is most important. We're just talking about some of the more trivial aspects, how the Rockets move forward, because that's what this podcast specializes in. That's our niche. And so trying to provide a little bit of initial guidance about where things are going to go. But as of right now, even if the Rockets wanted to cut him, I don't believe they can. It's up to the NBA. Once they step in, that investigation takes precedence. They have jurisdiction. And quite frankly, above all else, I'm sure some will say, why do the Rockets care about the $16 million? Just cut the guy. Actually, if you're that upset with Kevin Porter Jr., and assuming this is true, you should be, Why do you want to give him $16 million if you don't have to? Anything that you do with that money, if this incident is true, as everything appears, would be better than giving that to KPJ. Anything you do with it. And perhaps you could end up donating it to a domestic violence foundation. There's so many different things you could do with it. All of it is better than paying $16 million to a guy who's not going to play and probably isn't going to play in the NBA again because he appears to have done something really, really awful. Again, pending investigation, you let the NBA do what it's got to do. But if there's a way that you can void the contract entirely and not even have to deal with negotiating the terms of a split and paying him, the rest of his contract this season, that's ideal on a number of levels. So for starters, I think the NBA, it's written into the CBA, they have to take jurisdiction on an issue this serious, then it's their business first. And beyond that, even if it wasn't required, which I believe it is, it just makes sense for the Rockets because if there's a path for the NBA to just void the contract, then you should absolutely be open to taking that. And perhaps that's what plays out. Again, there will be more information, I'm sure, that gets released over the coming days and weeks. This is just me reacting in the initial hours after all of this became public. A few other things that I want to clarify. So this was a bit of an awkward day for the Rockets for everything to leak. Well, it's never a good day, but this was especially awkward because Houston had its annual Patriot Day each year on or around September 11th. They do something honoring first responders in the Houston area. This year it was a luncheon, I believe, at Toyota Center. And Rafael Stone, GM of the Rockets, Gretchen Shear, president of the Rockets, were on scene and doing some media interviews. Tari Eason was there as well, helping out. The Rockets would not have put these players out there, or executives for that matter, if they had known this was coming. Trust me when I say that they were every bit as shocked and disappointed as you are. This caught them off guard as well. Again, this all happened within a matter of hours. The incident itself, the 911 call, was 6:11 or 6:45, excuse me. And then you had to get investigators out there, take statements, review evidence. You had to arrest Kevin, book him, charge him. There's video of him going into a police car floating around on Twitter. And then the Rockets media availability, this luncheon started at 11. So no, I don't think the Rockets knew. It's just unfortunate timing that they had a separate event today. They're still learning. So part of the reason they haven't come down too harshly, well, number one, the league has jurisdiction. And secondly, they're still trying to find out. They were caught as off guard by this as you were. Again, this all played out in real time. So I do not believe it's a situation where they had some prior warning and they were trying to be, sort of clever in, I guess, minimizing this. Or I saw some people pointing out that, it's good timing because Sunday was the opener of the NFL season and the Astros are home and winning a lot of games. And so maybe it gets, no. There's no timing element to this. There's no trying to sweep it under the rug. I feel confident in saying the Rockets take this issue very, very seriously. It's just the timing is what it is. This is when it happened, and they're learning of it today the same way we are. And my guess is that they make a clear statement that this is absolutely unacceptable. It's not what they stand for. It's not what any NBA organization would stand for, and I think it will be dealt with appropriately. One last thing that I want to clarify, I've seen some trying to draw parallels between this and Anthony Lamb, a player who was under contract with the Rockets for a couple of seasons, who was accused of rape when he was in college at the University of Vermont. This is a very different situation than that based on the arrest and the charges. If we're talking, and the fact that it happened while Kevin was under contract with the Rockets, it's not that the other incident isn't serious. It absolutely is. But if we're talking years before, no arrest, no charges, and the player strongly denies it, then it does put the team in an awkward spot. I'm not saying that you can't make the argument that even the accusation itself should be disqualifying from him playing in the NBA because it's a privilege and a right. No, that's absolutely fair. You can say that. But in terms of comparing the two situations, again, no arrest, no charge, the player denies it. Here, he's arrested, he's charged, there's physical evidence, We'll see if he denies it. But I don't know how he can if there's this evidence and people went out to the scene. It's not to excuse the other. I'm simply saying that these are in different buckets. And this happened while he was under contract with the Rockets, who had worked with him so hard on his anger issues, on the baggage that had plagued him in college at USC and with the Cleveland Cavaliers, his first NBA home. So the fact that this happened under the Rockets' watch, after they stood by him so many times, gave him the contract, did so many things to try and help him take the next step, not just as a player, but as a person, this is a different level. And that's not to say that you can't or shouldn't be upset about the way they've handled situations in the past. You absolutely can. All I'm saying is that this situation is different. And assuming that there's nothing stunning that gets released about this beyond what is reported right now, then I assume the team will deal with this relatively quickly and it's going to be a pretty easy decision for them. As far as the basketball side of this, and again, I want to underscore that I understand this is trivial. What is going on with the victim and the real life implications for everyone involved is far more important. This is simply digging into the weeds for our Rockets basketball podcast. Certainly not having Kevin around, assuming that's the outcome, is going to hurt the Rockets a little bit this season. He was not going to be the starting point guard. They signed Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks in the offseason. He probably wasn't going to start at all because of that. But he was entering his fifth NBA year. At a bare minimum, I know he was, a frequent debate topic in regards to, is he a point guard or not? Is he going to be efficient enough? Is he a good enough defender? Yada, yada. At a bare minimum, he's a competent rotation player for a Rockets team that is otherwise extremely young and just went 22-60. Not having him is going to hurt this season. And so maybe it puts the floor a little bit lower. But in the grand scheme, and now you have a coach you trust in Ime Udoka to sort of lead this rebuild in its second phase, I don't think it's all that much of a needle mover in regards to the long term, the actual championship blueprint. Because the way I think the Rockets look at this, and really anyone with common sense would look at it, Kevin Porter Jr. was always a lottery ticket. There's a reason you got him for so cheap. There's a reason why his contract had all that year-to-year team optionality. He was a risk. The anger management issues were and clearly are very real. So, in a perfect world, would he have turned it around? Sure, he's a very talented player, but I don't think it's something they were counting on. This is not like the same thing happening with one of your core six, one of your blue chip prospects that you're really counting on. I do think it makes Jalen Green in particular, since Kevin Porter Jr. was someone of a very similar archetype, it makes Jalen's development all the more important. But in terms of the significance, again, Kevin Porter Jr., if he worked out, and now he's clearly not, was always something analogous to the cherry on top of the sundae. He was not the foundation. There was far too much of a risk. There was always a possibility, and the Rockets knew that. That's why they negotiated all these team options in the contract. There was always possibility this could happen. So while it's sad and it's unfortunate, I do not think it changes the long-term trajectory all that much. The long-term growth of this rebuild and what they hope gets them back to a championship level, it's the core six, these high first-round picks from the last few years, lottery-level talents, Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, Amin Thompson. Those are your foundation. And then the guys who invested heavily in this offseason, Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, who just wrapped up a great FIBA World Cup run with Canada. He had 39 points Sunday, and all of a sudden that became a footnote in terms of our Rockets discourse, understandably so, given the severity of the allegations against Kevin Porter Jr. That is your foundation moving forward. It wasn't even clear if Kevin Porter Jr. would be with the team after this coming season. Again, his contract wasn't guaranteed. There's a chance you'd use him as salary filler. There's a chance maybe you just let him go if another incident happened, which clearly it did. Kevin Porter Jr. was always a piece that would be nice if it worked out, but he was never a core piece. He was never essential. So while it's unfortunate that didn't work out, and in this particular season, because so many of those core six members are still relatively young, I do think it lowers the floor of this team. In the long haul, I don't think it actually hurts them all that much. And if anything, it might actually accelerate the development of Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore, because now there's a few more minutes for them to grab in their rookie season. And of course, now they can be mentored by Ime Udoka as the Rockets move forward. So that's sort of my look. It's a sad day, but in the grand scheme, I don't think it's necessarily a pivotal day, if that makes sense. It's extremely unfortunate for the people involved in the situation. That's what's most important. And in terms of the Rockets, who invested so much in Kevin Porter Jr., not just the player, but the person in the last couple of years, it is unfortunate that it seems like that investment won't have the long-term payoff. But I don't think it's surprising. They knew that this was something of a project, that this was definitely a risk. And unfortunately, this is how it played out. One last thing I'll say about it. The Rockets gave Kevin Porter Jr. second chances. I want to make clear that the second chances they gave were not on something this severe. However, they did give some second chances, most notably, the incident I referenced on New Year's Day 2022. There were some people, most notably Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated, who said, the Rockets should just cut him then. And instead, the Rockets, tried to reform him once more. And from then until today, there weren't any issues, at least none that went public, none that we know of. And so if this happens in the future, I'm sure there will be a temptation amongst some to feel burned and say, it's not worth it. And I think that would be a bit of a overreaction. Now, let's be clear, there's differing levels of infractions. Certainly not advocating for a second chance after what he's accused of doing this morning. That's unacceptable. There should be zero tolerance for that. However, I'm sure there will be some that the next time there's, a lesser infraction saying, well, let's cut bait here, because if we don't, it could escalate to what the Kevin Porter Jr. situation eventually became. To me, that would be a bit unfair, because it should be noted there are plenty of people who have taken advantage of second chances, that have reformed their behavior and improved and matured. Just because it didn't happen in this case doesn't mean that it can't for someone else in the future. I hope this doesn't lead to players being declared lost causes early in their careers in the future, because there are several examples of guys who have turned it around after having some off-court issues or concerns. It just apparently is not going to happen here. I think with KPJ, you have to deal with the situation swiftly. And again, as soon as the NBA completes its investigation, regardless of whether they void the contract themselves or impose some other form of discipline and then say, the Rockets, you can handle it from here. I think the Rockets will be very swift in their response to this. But in terms of, I guess, tying it in with before, for starters, I'm uncomfortable with sort of using it to advance personal agendas. I know some people, a lot of people, quite frankly, have looked at Kevin Porter Jr. as something of a lightning rod, and that's completely fair, but this is an entirely separate situation. So let's please not try and conflate the allegations of domestic assault and strangulation with our misgivings of Kevin Porter Jr., the basketball player, or some of the things like him leaving the arena at halftime. No, these are entirely separate incidents. And I think the way to look at this moving forward is that you should be aware of the risk, which the Rockets clearly were. Again, that's why they have all these team options in the contract. They know why they got him for so cheap. They did invest in his personal development. They got him to work with John Lucas. It's not like they turned a blind eye to it. They were very aware. You simply have to be ready, and I think they will be, to take action if things do escalate. In my opinion, the proper response is not to just have, earlier in the process, just a rule with an iron fist, and the slightest problem say, you know what, this guy's a bad apple and he's going to turn into the next KPJ. This is just going to escalate and it's a ticking time bomb. No, I think that's unfair. There are plenty of players who have had some concerns, some minor discipline issues early in their careers, and they've grown out of it. They've matured. They've become better people. We should leave the door open to that. What, in my opinion, is the right way to handle it is to just, file it away. Consider it certainly when you do things like negotiate their contracts, that the Rockets clearly did in the Kevin Porter Jr. situation, and then be ready to act if and when it does escalate to that next level, as it did today. And again, the Rockets can't do that right now because the NBA has jurisdiction. But if and when they have the ability to do so, and they might not even need to, the NBA might just void it themselves, I expect them to handle this appropriately. And again, the basketball impacts, that's minimal. We've got plenty other shows, I'm sure, in the days, weeks, and months ahead to talk about that. in the short term, you'll feel it. In the long term, honestly, don't think it's that big of a deal. But again, we can get into that more in the future because I don't want to try and trivialize this situation too much on what is honestly just a shocking and very sad day. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Again, this is a bit of a different episode. No Paolo, no music. Want this to be fairly no frills, just get some initial reaction and context out there. Bottom line is I think you should plan on Kevin Porter Jr. not being a part of this basketball team moving forward. Never say never. Maybe there's something else that emerges. I don't know what that would or could be, but I think from a practical standpoint, Jalen Green is your starter at shooting guard. He's your future at the position, and those minutes off the bench that you were looking at, be it point guard, shooting on small forward that were going to Kevin Porter Jr., that's probably going more to Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore, the two rookies you just drafted now. And bottom line, I just don't think Kevin Porter Jr. is a part of the future of the Houston Rockets anymore. We'll see. Always possible that I'm wrong, but in this case, I highly doubt I am. It's just a matter of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and letting the party with jurisdiction, that's the NBA league office, take the initial steps, and the Rockets will see where things are after that. Anyway, that'll do it for today's show. We'll be back hopefully with some more positive stuff in the days ahead. If you want more content before then, certainly rocketswire.usatoday.com. That's got all of our news stories on the Kevin Porter Jr. situation, but also myself on Twitter at Ben Dubose, Paolo on Twitter at Paolo Alves NBA, and this show on Twitter, The Logger Line, where you can get information for our sponsors and partners and friends of the program as well. With that, I will adjourn. Thanks as always for listening. Please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.